President Tudjman of Croatia spoke of the Serbians' dogmatic militarism and expansionist aims. In turn, President Milosevic of Serbia called the Croatians totalitarian chauvinists, guilty of ruthless discrimination against the Serbian minority in their republic.
By constant armed attacks on the territories inhabited by Serbs.
Lord Carrington said he had anticipated the two sides would set out their opening positions in the toughest terms.
You can look for common ground, and with a little ingenuity you can sometimes find some way forward. Whether you can or not remains to be seen. I don't think that it's going to be at all easy, but I don't think you ought to despair of doing so before you've even started.
The British Foreign Secretary emphasised that the stakes were very high.
I think Europe is on the edge of a disaster on this question of Yugoslavia, because I think it will be a disaster for Europe if the present fighting in Croatia continued or got worse.
After today's formal opening for the conference, the precarious process of detailed negotiation is expected to begin here next Thursday. At least today, all the participants did agree to work with Lord Carrington. At the moment, the Serbians don't want to be seen to be sabotaging the peace process any more than the Croatians. But reconciling their differences will still be an extraordinarily tough job. David Walter, BBC News, The Hague.
The Yugoslav president, Stipe Mesic, who is himself a Croat, has repeated his warning that he'll order the Yugoslav army to withdraw to its barracks, and if the order is not carried out, he'll consider this to be a coup. There was an early lull in today's fighting, but then sporadic battles broke out in eastern Croatia for control of the towns there and the motorway to Belgrade.
Serbian rebels held their position on the bridge. The battle for the motorway between Zagreb and Belgrade entered its third day, and Croats continued their attempts to open the road between the east and west of their republic. The main point of conflict was the village of Rajic, close to the motorway, bombarded yesterday and attacked again today. Two assaults, amazingly, with a break for lunch. On the Croatian side, there were at least 3 dead and 7 injured. Serbian casualties not known. Peace conference or no peace conference, there's certainly no peace here and none in prospect. But Vukovar on the river Danube had its quietest day in 2 weeks. There is a lull, at least temporary, in some places. An elaborate system of bunkers and trenches has been built around the city of Osijek in preparation against the final onslaught that is expected. There, 2 of the defenders, in the absence of external danger, were playing catch with hand grenades. Martin Bell, BBC News, Osijek.
An opinion poll for tomorrow's Independent on Sunday suggests the Conservatives are maintaining a narrow lead over Labour. It's the third survey within a week to put the Tories ahead. The poll, conducted yesterday and today by NOP, has the Conservatives on 41%, Labour on 39%, and the Liberal Democrats on 15%. The latest Newsnight poll of polls, compiled between August the 23rd and September the 2nd, puts the Conservatives 1 point ahead of Labour, again on 41%. The Liberal Democrats remain on 15%.
For John Major on his way to Balmoral today, this latest poll will confirm his cautious approach to an autumn election. If the current trends were repeated on polling day, he'd risk losing his majority, and many advisers say he should wait till next year. Labour argues the Conservative lead in recent opinion polls is due to John Major's high international profile. They now plan to turn the spotlight back onto the economy.
When people return to looking at health, education, transport, the failure to invest in industry and training, and above all, the fastest rising unemployment anywhere in the Western world, they will not believe that the Conservatives, who've been in power for 12 years and created these problems, have any answers to them today.
But the Conservatives say Labour's on the slide.
I welcome concentration on the economic issues, because people are sensible enough to look at the policies of the parties. And every poll that's been taken shows that they recognise that the Conservative Party is the more competent party at running an economy, and that Labour can't be trusted to run a free enterprise economy.
The Liberal Democrats, whose conference opens tomorrow, say Mr. Major should stop dithering over November.
He's got to stop keeping the country hanging about. It's bad for the economy, it's bad for our politics, and frankly I think it's bad for him. He should put an end to the speculation and put an end to it quickly. Get ministers back behind their desks if there isn't going to be one, and get us bringing Britain out of the recession that he and his government caused.
But a survey of 100 Conservative MPs for tomorrow's Sunday Telegraph shows just 17 in favour of November. Inside the Conservative Party at least, the Prime Minister's under little pressure to go for an early election.
The KGB was behind last month's coup attempt in the Soviet Union, according to the Russian President Boris Yeltsin. He said the organization would now have to be completely restructured. Mr. Yeltsin also spoke of the difficulties facing the country as it moves towards a more democratic system after decades of communist rule.
Mr. Yeltsin's on the campaign trail at present, not so much at home as abroad. 5 journalists from Germany, Japan, Britain, France and Spain were invited to take part in an interview at which he could prove his democratic credentials. There were, he said, no isms now in Russia, and certainly not communism. The country was being, in his words, de-ideologized. You yourself have been a communist all your life. Your critics accused you during and after the coup attempt of behaving in an arbitrary manner. How easy is it to change the attitudes of this country?
It's difficult for a country and people who've lived, worked and been molded by this system. For me, it's required a change in character and attitude. But if we want Russia to become democratic, we must overcome these difficulties.
The German correspondent asked what he'd do about the KGB.
The KGB will be completely restructured down to its very roots. I think one of the most important people in the coup was Khrushchev, the head of the KGB.
The correspondent from Spain sounded him out about his attitude to Mr. Gorbachev. In the past, Mr. Yeltsin said he'd support Mr. Gorbachev for the presidency of the overall Union at the next election.
I think our good relations will continue while we're both presidents, provided he doesn't change. I think he's had so many lessons that he won't return to his former self.
Mr. Gorbachev says he wants the Swedish form of social democracy. I put that to Mr. Yeltsin. What sort of model do you have? What would be the Yeltsin model?
I'm not a conservative and I'm not in the center. I'm rather to the left of center, in favor of social democracy. You don't have to have a prepared system. Maybe you can create something new.
It was a powerful performance and should enhance his reputation in the West. But it won't altogether satisfy his critics here, who claim Mr. Yeltsin is still too tempestuous and too impulsive. John Simpson, BBC News, Moscow.
Opposition parties in Azerbaijan are calling on people to boycott tomorrow's presidential election there. The opposition have pulled out of the election, describing it as unconstitutional. As a result, President Ayaz Mutalibov, accused of supporting last month's coup attempt, looks set to win.
Rallies by the alliance of opposition parties known as the Popular Front attracted thousands this week in the capital Baku, but Azerbaijan, the republic at the forefront of the nationalist movement in the USSR 2 years ago, now looks on in envy at the democracy and independence in the Baltic states. Tomorrow, the republic's president, Ayaz Mutalibov, widely suspected of having enthusiastically supported last month's failed coup in Moscow, is all set to be re-elected unopposed. When Soviet troops put down a nationalist uprising in January 1990, killing at least 150 people, Mutalibov was the man Moscow brought in to maintain control. At opposition headquarters, they portray Lenin and Mutalibov as one and the same. But the Popular Front has withdrawn their candidate, the only other, claiming that tomorrow's election is unconstitutional.
After the election, we'll tell the people it wasn't democratic, and Mutalibov is not the constitutional president.
But the president is no longer a communist, said his spokesman today. He'd merely used the party in the past to achieve good. The opposition says that most people won't vote in tomorrow's election.